On this episode of The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up.
One of the reasons we came all the way to Liberia was to meet with Corey Stern.
When I first came and saw this place and these waves and this beauty, I knew that people could come here and enjoy the place and really help the people.
I'm the president of the Liberian Surfing Association, and being a part of the Strongheart Fellows Program has just been a blessing to me.
Without his love for this place, we would not be here. He is our Messiah.
It's not the only time lofty, cult-adjacent language shows up around this project.
I probably shouldn't say this, but if you guys could see Alphanso, you could see that he's in a very physical relationship with the water.
It is what it is, right? And I think we're not making any legal conclusions. That's not our job. Our job is to put out there what the facts are, what the truth is, and let the attorneys conclude what they may.
When you know something and you're putting these things together and you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is one of the biggest things in the world.
And this is a story about people who are saying one thing and something else is going on behind the scenes.
Part of what my NGO does is we work with kids from exceptional young people from extreme circumstances.
Who are you when you're off camera? Who are you in the dark?
I don't think I'd want someone to make a film about my nonprofit. You don't want to see the sausage being made.
Because we don't believe victims. We don't believe the less powerful person ever.
This whole time, it's been in plain sight.
Have things that are hidden be made visible. At least you can see the snake now. This is big, right? This is big. How far does this thing go?
What if your greatest enemy was camouflaged, posing in your life? Perhaps your closest confidant, a family member, or a favorite politician. Exploiting your weaknesses, sabotaging your goals, learning your vulnerabilities. And what would you do if they framed you for a crime you didn't commit? What would you do if they turned your friends against you, convinced everyone you were delusional? And what would you do if they hired a lawyer to weaponize a cease and desist against you? Would you stay quiet? What would you do if no one believed you? How far would they go for a lie? And how far would you go for the truth? A true psychological horror story about how our society is shaped, not by left or right, man or woman, religious or secular, but by predators and prey. Follow me down a rabbit hole of manipulation, power, and psychological warfare, where reality is constructed, not communicated. A journey that reshaped my entire understanding of trust, credibility, and ultimately had me asking, what does it even mean to be human? A story of deception, manipulation, and power so sophisticated and orchestrated, it's almost like it was scripted. This is The Unraveling. It's November 2024, and Sutton Foster, my favorite Broadway performer, is starring in a limited run of Once Upon a Mattress that opens next month in Los Angeles. I'm debating whether or not I can justify splurging on a trip to go see it. The first time I saw her was Thoroughly Modern Millie, way back when she was an unknown actress who became a star overnight. A few years later, the national tour came through Dallas. By then, I was married, and I couldn't wait to share my favorite show with my husband. We walked out of the theater after the show, and I was buzzing, and I asked, "So, what did you think?" He looked at me with both surprise and concern and said, "I didn't know it was going to be about sex trafficking." His reaction floored me. You could have knocked me over with a feather. But then I realized he wasn't wrong. The villain of the show runs a boarding house for young actresses, and she's constantly searching for girls who have no one looking out for them. Every time she finds one without a family, she says, "So sad to be all alone in the world." But her delivery of the line is so over the top and so campy that I never even registered the darkness underneath it. It would take a few more years before the glaringly problematic racial issues in the show would enter my awareness, because sometimes something sits right in front of you, but it just doesn't click because you can't imagine it being real. Your brain just edits it right out. Back to my planning, the musical is in Los Angeles, not far from where Corey lives. If I can see the musical and meet up with her, maybe I can justify the splurge. There's only one weekend that fits my schedule, so I text her to see if she's free. She replies that every weekend works except that one, because she'll be in Hawaii for her son's graduation. Her son? This was the first time I'd ever heard anything about a son, and we'd been talking nearly daily for almost 6 months, so I was definitely surprised. She said it was one of the young people from her program, but didn't offer much detail. Ultimately, I never made the trip, and when that December weekend came around, I sent her a playlist I'd made about our friendship. Music helps me process emotion, and this wasn't just a list of songs. It was a curated narrative about how I'd finally come to understand myself as a neurodivergent person through our friendship and how freeing that had been. I didn't expect her to listen really closely. Maybe she'd play it, maybe not. Instead, she called me from Hawaii to tell me how much she loved it. Not just in a polite, hey, thanks, that's nice way. She actually listened and understood the underlying narrative. She called it a work of art. She told me no one had ever made something like that for her, and she sounded genuinely moved. She responded like someone who saw me clearly, valued what they saw. Up to that point, I had been holding a little distance. I had been keeping a little bit of guard up, not fully sure where to place her in my life or how seriously to take this friendship. But her phone call? From Hawaii? From a trip to visit her family? That dissolved the last bit of guard that I was keeping up. Because of course you let your guard down when someone sees you on that level and appreciates you and gets you. I had no idea that some people create those situations purposely, not to connect, not to create friendship, but for manipulation and control. You're listening to The Unraveling, how your reality is made up. To recap, in the early 2000s, Hollywood producer turned self-styled humanitarian Corey Shepard Stern took a severance package and traveled to Africa, calling herself an American refugee.
I was a refugee from the American television industry, as you can appreciate, and I wanted to take a break from the insanity of that, so I went to Nigeria. I was running away from Hollywood. I was an American refugee in Nigeria, basically.
She recruited Liberian orphans from a refugee camp to become the poster children for her new nonprofit organization, Strongheart. The first fellow, a 14-year-old named Lavetta, temporarily moved to the U.S. and became the primary fundraiser for Strongheart. An online education from a school in Canada gave her the freedom to travel all over the country, selling her Akawela necklaces at speaking engagements, small groups, and jewelry shows. And her hard work paid off because by 2010, they had raised over $250,000 specifically for the house, and it's ready to open in Robertsport. Lavetta was the first fellow to live in the house, staying there with the staff for a few months until the group of orphan siblings could join them. Over the next 2.5 years, according to Strongheart's official tax filings, approximately 50 different volunteers cycled through the program as teachers, facilitators, or therapists. That reminds me of one of the pictures I saw online. There's a large blackboard at Strongheart, and Corey has written down each month of the year, and under each month, a list of names of volunteers who will be there and what they'll be teaching. It's an eye-opening look at the level of churn these kids were dealing with. I'm trying to imagine myself sitting in their shoes. And as an autistic person who always wants all the information, my first thought is this written down anywhere else? Or when it gets erased, do I just have to try to remember who's going to be coming into my home and when? And that's not even to mention the emotional part of it, which is the most harmful. Because this level of turnover is not just inappropriate. It runs directly counter to internationally recognized best practices for child protection because it's harmful. It means they don't have consistent adult relationships, no attachment security. In child safeguarding literature, this kind of rapid volunteer churn is considered a significant red flag. Not because it implies malice on any individual person's part, but because it reflects a model, a structure that's designed around the volunteer's experience rather than the children's needs. It suggests that this transformational experience was for the guests and the volunteers, not the kids. The kids were just the backdrop. The kids were the marketing. And that number, 50 volunteers, it also makes genuine oversight logistically difficult. And it raises practical questions like, were background checks conducted? Were there structured training for each new arrival? Were they supervised? These are the kinds of questions an auditor, caseworker, or safeguarding specialist would ask, because turnover of this magnitude is inherently high risk for vulnerable youth. It just is. Strongheart's public messaging used progressive humanitarian language, but the documented structure of the program sits far outside established child protection norms. If Strongheart had ever undergone a formal safeguarding review from a body like UNICEF or the UNHCR, the outcome would likely have raised major concerns, not about intent, but about capacity, oversight, and basic standards of care. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here's how one volunteer described their experience in April 2011.
I was slightly nervous about how I would be able to connect with the fellows. How would I talk with them about having compassion for all beings, including those who have caused extraordinary pain for their country, and possibly even directly on the fellows themselves? I didn't have a full grasp on where the fellows were emotionally, intellectually, or spiritually.
What makes this volunteer's reflection so damning is that she actually names the red flags. She just doesn't follow them to the obvious conclusion, saying, I didn't have a full grasp on where the fellows were emotionally, intellectually, or spiritually. That alone should have told her that she was out of her depth and unqualified. A volunteer with no understanding of the student's emotional or psychological state is, in child safety terms, a profound risk factor.
Here were children who had lost their parents, friends, and family, were uprooted not only from their homes but from their countries, had experienced hunger at a level I couldn't imagine, and now were living with the faith that this small American organization was going to support them for the rest of their lives. And I was asking them to be open to the possibility of giving up their fear, giving up their hopelessness, to believe that they themselves were powerful enough people to evoke change, first in themselves and through them the rest of their country. And I did it. I asked them to do this. I gave them scientific reasons how it was possible. I gave them spiritual reasons as to how faith would carry them through. I gave them emotional reasons as to how there were people all over the world praying for them, meditating for their healing and well-being.
She goes on to list, almost with awe, the depth and the scale of the fellows' trauma, war, displacement, hunger, the loss of parents, friends, entire communities, hardships she has never faced, never studied, never been trained to support, and never had to survive. Yet somehow she still believes she is equipped to guide them. Instead of providing actual skills or resources, she flew across the world to deliver what amounts to magical thinking. She told survivors of atrocities that we can't even fathom or imagine that the path forward was to just give up fear and believe in themselves. The arrogance is jaw-dropping. And underneath that arrogance is the quiet violence of paternalism. Young people sitting in a house with no running water, minimal electricity, being lectured by Western volunteers about personal empowerment, being told that structural collapse, global extraction, and the aftermath of wars funded and fueled by Western powers can be solved through attitude and hard work. That isn't support, it's denial of their reality. It's erasure. Dressing that up as compassion is its own kind of cruelty. When people talk about the Trump era, one thing they often say is, the cruelty is the point. The kind of cruelty that loudly insults and degrades and strips you of your rights in broad daylight, that's only one kind of cruelty. The quiet version, that kind of cruelty is the hardest to confront because it insists that it's love. There is cruelty that wears a halo and smiles while it takes something from you. There is cruelty that disguises itself as a victim or as a martyr, demanding gratitude from the very people it's harmed. Cruelty that wraps itself in the humanitarian language of empowerment, healing, transformation, while accomplishing the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's just so twisted, right? I mean, you know, the opposite is being achieved in the name of the exact thing that you care about, you know?
So if the program wasn't providing consistent trauma-informed care or accredited education, what exactly was it designed to do?
The fellows participate in a specialized development through enterprise, devoted to helping each fellow master crucial real-world skills to create their own exit strategy from poverty and address important needs within their communities.
Those two key words, development and enterprise. Those are the words that define Strongheart's mission, not child welfare. That phrase, exit strategy from poverty, is insidious, especially in a country with 85% unemployment and a country that has had most of its wealth extracted by one American company. Because at the end of the day, this is just a repackaged version of pick yourself up by your bootstraps ideology. Calling it an exit strategy from poverty doesn't actually make it so.
Each fellow will do an assessment of a specific need in the world. For instance, does an area village suffer from unsafe drinking water? Are the rates of HIV in teenage girls increasing in their community? Or it could be, as in the case of Lavetta, targeting other gifted and talented displaced youth in need of housing and education.
Even the examples given show how developmentally inappropriate this program was. Barely educated children in one of the poorest nations on earth, with 85% unemployment, should not be asked to fix key infrastructure issues like finding safe drinking water or reducing HIV rates. It's absurd on its face. After identifying a, quote, need, each fellow was to form partnerships with NGOs, government community leaders, businesses, and experts. They were told this would teach the power of connectivity, but it's also a good way to leverage new connections, because someone might say no to working with you, but they would say yes to a needy kid.
Each fellow then executes their project with the assistance of their Strongheart team. The project will be a venture that will be triple bottom line, benefiting the fellow, their peers, and their community.
A legitimate entrepreneurship program would specify things like accounting, market research, business law, or operations management. Yet none of that appears here. Teaching entrepreneurship without seed funding, real curriculum, or real money going back into the fellows' pockets is just psychological conditioning, grooming these kids to create a free or cheap labor force.
I'm the president of the Liberian Surfing Association, and being a part of the Strongheart Fellows Program has just been a blessing to me.
That's Alphanso Appleton. He's from a large family in Robertsport. They survived the war, and thanks in large part to his grandmother's fierce protection, no one in his family was forced to become a soldier. But at one point, he got separated from them. A profile from his college, Brigham Young University in Hawaii, says, at the age of 16, he reunites with his family in Robertsport and sees surfing for the first time. He becomes one of the first dozen or so surfers in Liberia. And you can actually see him in this Reuters video that covers the very first surfing competition in 2009.
Held last November, was the first of its kind in the country and managed to attract a number of enthusiasts. Liberia now wants to develop popular surfing spots like those found in South Africa or Morocco.
I'm so used to seeing pictures of him as an adult that I'm taken aback to see just how young he looked as a 16-year-old when he started with Strongheart. After joining Strongheart, he wrote a poem to mark the occasion, posted January 16th, 2011. O Strongheart, thy loving grace cradle me in thy arms. Thy beauty and thy compassion never cease to emulate thy giftful charms. That wear the web of love and tender from thy morning dove, O hold me Strongheart, O hold me dear, take away all scares and unwanted fear, O Strongheart. I can see why he caught Strongheart's attention and was awarded a fellowship, even though he wasn't an orphan and didn't need to be taken away from his family. He has the tender heart of a poet, a megawatt smile, and is a hard worker to boot. Oh, and one more thing.
That's so beautiful. I mean, I just feel teary. So let's go to the science of it as therapists. And so your faith is a very important embodied experience of connection.
Right.
And then you're in this physical experience. I probably shouldn't say this, but if you guys could see Alphanso, you could see that he's in a very physical relationship with the water. I mean, oh my gosh, he doesn't work out or whatever, but you can see that he works really hard in the water. Let's just say that.
Thank you.
Okay?
I never realized that.
With Strongheart's help, he and a few others started the Robertsport Club, later known as the Liberian Surfing Association. The club provides scholarships for local youth, said Appleton, and a surf house where they could do homework, make art, or check out surfboards to hit the waves. The goal of the association was to oversee all the surfing-related activity within the country and to start running competitions and create scholarships. The creation of the LSA coincided with growing ecotourism in Robertsport. The Kwepunha Surf Retreat, owned by Americans Daniel Hopkins and Sean Brody, helped attract international visitors to the coast as well as provide jobs for residents.
This must be what they meant by partnering with other organizations and groups in the Development by Enterprise program. Because in my research about Liberia, I didn't see much about surfing or tourism. So this must be a new operation. According to their website, Kwepunha Surf Retreat is a 12-bedroom hostel with a volleyball court, an open-air patio, and a large balcony equipped with hammocks overlooking the Atlantic Ocean.
We went out there and we saw a lot of opportunity within the community. We had great waves, but we also saw a lot of opportunity to help the local people and bring tourism to Liberia and use surfing as the catalyst.
That's Daniel Hopkins, one of the co-owners.
In 2011, 2 intrepid Californians opened a surf camp in Robertsport, and the seeds of a nascent surf tourism industry started to sprout.
Time magazine recounted the backstory this way.
It took enormous work to make Kwepunha a reality. Aided by local workers, they repaired the ruins of a luxury hotel built in the 1970s, remnants of Robertsport's glory days as a beachfront getaway for wealthy Europeans. They pulled out trees that had sprouted in now roofless living rooms and filled in walls pockmarked with bullet holes to create an airy hostel.
That description sounds suspiciously like the Strongheart house. So I look up pictures to compare, and it's the exact same building, just with a fresh coat of paint. I check multiple angles to be sure, and interior and exterior pictures match. So how did these guys get involved? Sean Brody, one of the co-owners, first came to Robertsport in 2009 while working on a show called On Safari. It's a TV show ostensibly about the McIntyre family's surfing travels around the world. But when I watched the episode, I realized the show isn't really aimed at surfers because in each episode, they also visit several local nonprofits like orphanages or medical missions. And at the end of the show, it's basically a recruiting and support pitch for that week's organizations, which I notice are usually faith-based. During the episode featuring Strongheart, they also visit a dental mission, and I learned that there are only 6 dentists in all of Liberia for a population of 3 million.
One of the reasons we came all the way to Liberia was to meet with Corey Stern.
Strongheart House is a house for exceptional young people. We found the property about a year and a half ago, and we've been raising the money to restore it.
Now, Strongheart House isn't actually open yet. They're just filming the volunteers doing the rehab work, and they're filming Corey leading a tour through the house. She points out the window and casually tosses off this comment.
During the war, everybody fled. We want to help rebuild all the houses in the neighborhood, too.
That's literally the first and only time I have ever heard that. And if that was something they intended to do, I'm sure she would have broadcast it widely.
When I first came and saw this place and these waves and this beauty, I knew that people could come here and enjoy the place and really help the people.
Remember how Corey described being a producer?
Is like a person who drives past a vacant lot and sees the house that could be on it. You envision the house, find the architect / director who can build that house. You help them find the craftsman who can carry out the architect's vision, but you're the person that holds the big vision, and then you put the pieces together, and then yes, you herd cats.
So she had the vision, and she found the people who could pull it off. In addition to the main house where the kids lived, there's another shell of a building down the beach, and Brody and Hopkins remodel it, calling it the Villas, and then make it an extension of the retreat. When Brody posts before and after photos to Facebook to celebrate, Corey says,
I love this so much. I remember the first night I dragged you over there on the On Safari trip. You were brave enough to go at night. It had so much potential, and now, here it is.
From this comment, it looks pretty clear that Corey recruited Sean.
Alphanso Appleton, Fonzie as the locals call him, manages Kwepunha, a surf camp that acts as the heart of the Robertsport surfing community.
So she recruited Sean, recruited Alphanso, and voila, surf retreat.
Brody saw Liberia as a chance to get things right from the get-go. The blank slate of Liberia is what caught our attention. He eventually got a master's degree from SDSU in sustainable surf tourism. They funded the retreat with their savings and money from a small group of investors. Kwepunha opened in 2012.
Wait a minute. What do you mean funded the retreat? Who did they pay and what did they pay for? Because Strongheart didn't report that transaction on their tax forms. In fact, Strongheart never lists any assets under land and building. Probably because at the time, it's illegal for foreigners to even own land in Liberia. With 2 full years in Liberia, they've spent $120,000 on rent and maintenance, which is less than half of what they made from the sales of the necklaces. So they've made 6 figures of capital improvements to this property that they don't own. And then in 2012, when they move, do they sell it to the surf retreat to get their money back and invest it in the next Strongheart house? Or do they just flush all that money down the drain and walk away from it? Because the only difference that I can see in this tax form compared to all of the other years surrounding it is that this is the only year they declare a Liberian bank account. These facts raise a series of red flags about asset diversion, violation of donors' intent, and labor trafficking. When donor money raised under humanitarian pretenses is later used for a for-profit business venture, it's called asset diversion. Using funds solicited for a children's home and then repurposing it as a surf hostel violates donor intent. Recruiting unpaid volunteers to do construction for what later became a for-profit hostel is another breach. These volunteers gave their labor, believing that they were building a sanctuary for traumatized youth. If the property later generated private income, they were essentially exploited as free labor for a private business. The fact that the new owners are from the same city as Corey and involved in Strongheart creates a conflict of interest. Typically, when those kinds of connections exist, regulators would view it as self-dealing, using charitable assets for the private benefit of associates. The public was told a clear story. Buy this necklace, fund this home for war-affected youth to heal and learn. Because if they said, buy this necklace so we can get in on the ground floor of Liberian tourism, they probably wouldn't sell as many. Strongheart used Lovetta's story to effectively convert donor emotion into private capital. Imagine being a teenager and watching the sanctuary you helped build, you helped fundraise, become a surf hostel for wealthy travelers. Having to reckon with the idea that their labor and trauma were used to create an asset that they were later excluded from would be devastating. They weren't part of a groundbreaking program for exceptional kids. They were monetized and then abandoned. And the violence to the soul is no less brutal when it's disguised in virtuous language. In fact, when it comes from someone you've started calling mom, it makes it even worse.
And then the true gut punch is when you do the deepest, worst thing is hate masquerading as love.
Tired of confronting your own discomfort around equality? Exhausted by having to relate to people of color as actual peers with agency, insight, and expertise? Try paternalism, the subtle racism that lets you feel enlightened while keeping everyone neatly in their proper place. With paternalism, you'll enjoy features like expert by birthright, why listen when you can explain, selective empathy engine, feel deeply for those poor communities, but not enough to see them as equals, the benevolent barrier, offer lots of help without any power, so they must stay dependent on your charity. Side effects may include career advancement through diversity work, unearned credibility, and an unshakable belief that you're the exception. Paternalism, because you're not biased, you're just trying to help.
So what happened to the fellows, the ones Lovetta raised all that money for? The ones Strongheart claimed needed a permanent home of healing? We'll circle back to that in just a minute. But first, we've heard Strongheart's origin story. Now let's hear another version.
American Sean Brody opened the country's first surf school here 5 years ago.
And it's picturesque. I think this is a little bit different than what most people imagine when they hear Liberia. In my personal and professional opinion, surfing tourism at the moment is one of the only draws, but I do believe that the tourism can grow.
That's Sean Brody, one of the co-owners of the retreat. I recognize him from a picture posted by Strongheart. He's written extensively online about the retreat, so he's going to get his own AI voice for the archival bits. Here's what he said about starting the business.
The most common question I'm asked is, how much did it cost to start Kwepunha Retreat? But the more relevant question is, how many years of relationship building did it take before the community invited you to start a business? I spent 4 years keeping promises, learning people's names, spending quality time, eating local meals, mentoring the youth, and sharing laughs with the locals of Robertsport before we attempted to start a social impact business there. We have been welcomed with open arms, and their community has become our community.
The official website says,
Sean Brody's trip to Liberia in 2009 was the spark that ignited Kwepunha Retreat. Without his love for this place, we would not be here. He is our Messiah.
It's not the only time lofty, cult-adjacent language shows up around this project.
I can't say the sport of surfing is single-handedly keeping the peace, but I believe there is a strong correlation, said Brody, the brother of U.S. actor Adam Brody of the OC fame, When you have a large population of youth with nothing to do, there's the temptation to get involved with drugs, to get involved with guns. Kwepunha runs a sharing system allowing local youngsters to borrow surfboards on condition that they are attending school, taking part in beach cleanups, and being generally responsible citizens. The kids in this community, I can't say they are perfect angels. They are arguing with each other and bickering, but they are fighting over who caught the best wave, not going back to civil war, Brody told AFP.
They run a borrowing system, attend school, do beach cleanups, show responsible citizenship, and you get access to a surfboard. But there's a crucial detail missing from the feel-good framing. Beach cleanup in Robertsport can include medical and human waste. Doing that in exchange for access to surfboards, which can't be purchased anywhere in Liberia, it raises questions. This isn't to demonize any one person, but to acknowledge the inherent power imbalance when a foreigner controls the single scarce resource that gives local youth entry into a global sport. Controlling access to the boards is essentially controlling access to the entire surfing community. That's an awful lot of social power for an outsider to wield.
After a year of planning and 6 months of development, Kwepunha Retreat is now operational and taking guests. Kwepunha Retreat will host the Robertsport Surf Club on the premises and provide a safe place for local youth to go after school and on the weekends. We will offer programming that will encourage experiential learning and entrepreneurial skills.
Surf Hostel, with men from abroad constantly coming and going, is about the last thing I would call a safe place for children or teens. Mixing a hostel with a children's center should set off pretty much every red flag in existence. Why does no one bat an eye at this arrangement? Brody is media savvy. He knows how to build credibility through media exposure and proximity to institutions.
Brody is a published photographer and writer who has contributed to the New York Times, ESPN, and the Surfer's Journal. Plus, he is also co-creator of the Surf Credits donation platform, sits as the senior advisor to the Liberian Surfing Federation, and is the Africa Development Advisor for the International Surfing Association.
This ESPN post titled The Rise of Liberia is my favorite example of Brody's strategy in action. He's the author and the subject of this article.
If Bob Dylan was a surfer, he would be singing about Liberia because the times are definitely a-changin' for this West African nation. Forget what you think you know about Liberia, because the future of this country lies in surfing. With warm water, perfect left-hand point breaks, no crowds, and friendly locals, the country is the ideal destination for any surfer's next trip.
It reads more like a tourism advertisement than journalism. Notably absent, any mention of the many risks and downsides of surf tourism in a post-conflict nation, like, for example, complete lack of competent medical care in case of an accident.
Kwepunha Retreat and Surf Resource Network have been major catalysts for this positive transformation, mentoring the local surfers and helping them receive international recognition, as well as from their own government. And the newly formed Liberian Surfing Federation has recently presented to the Liberian Ministry of Youth and Sport in attempts to have surfing officially recognized as a sport within Liberia.
So in this one post, he uses the credibility of 4 seemingly different organizations, and all of those organizations are ones he either spearheaded or has significant influence over. Creating multiple entities can create the impression of a larger ecosystem than actually exists on the ground. And Surf Resource Network, the nonprofit that was supposed to receive 15% of profits, it had a website and a Twitter account, but there's no paperwork beyond its initial filing. California records show that it was incorporated in 2011, but then it never filed anything else and was automatically dissolved in 3 years. According to Brody's Facebook page, Surf Resource Network was a project of another nonprofit named Waves International. When I contacted Waves to confirm, they said they happily provided fiscal sponsorship of the Surf Resource Network and held it dearly as a project of Waves International. But when I sent him the tax filings for the years in question and asked him to tell me which line exactly I should look for to find this fiscal sponsorship, the tune changed. Fiscal sponsorship isn't just a word. It's an actual set of legal and fiduciary responsibilities. In a true fiscal sponsorship arrangement, typically the sponsor provides fiduciary oversight, financial management, and other administrative services to the sponsored project. The fiscal sponsor is legally responsible for ensuring that the grant funds are used to further the charitable purposes of the grant. And so it's clear from this relationship that that's not the kind of relationship that Waves had with Surf Resource Network. So the question is, without any real paperwork, without a real organization, it's all just words, how does Brody and his partner manage to get on the radar of the Pope? In 2016, Brody and his partner are invited to the Vatican to participate in the World Congress of Scholas Occurentes, Pope Francis's International Youth Education Initiative. Well, who better to work with vulnerable kids than the Catholic Church? At the event, they give the Pope a surfboard, and in a room packed with people from dozens of different countries speaking dozens of different languages, Sean Brody uses his moment at the mic to say this.
The sport of surfing is an amazing conduit for peace, and in Liberia, we've been able to keep the kids out of trouble, keep them in school, and there's countries from all over the world here, but we really think there's two types of people in the world. There's people that surf, and then people that want to surf, and we would like to invite everybody to come join us, to join our tribe, join our family, and we very much look forward to working with Scholas Occurentes to use surfing as a conduit for peace.
In a room filled with dozens of cultures, languages, and faith traditions, telling everyone to join our tribe when the tribe is a business venture that depends on tourism dollars is certainly a choice. But is there anything more American than assuming that the only types of people in the world are people that are like you and the people that wish they were? Scholas describes its mission in terms like peace and culture of encounter. It's vague. So how did these surfers end up at the Vatican?
They both spearhead an organization that is allowing the rescue of many young people escaping war and poverty in Liberia. Both of them traveled to Rome for the closing of the 6th World Congress.
Fact check. They run a hostel in a war-torn country.
To be honest, when we first were asked to come here, we thought it was some sort of trick.
Their initiative, Surf Resource Liberia, has joined Pope Francis's Scholas educational project. The Scholas project is starting to emerge on a worldwide scale, using sports as a tool for transmitting values.
Brody's first instinct here might have been right. Because whether it's on a small scale like Strongheart, a national scale like Teen Mania, or a global scale like Scholas Occurentes, the pattern is consistent. Start with a vague and lofty mission no one can argue with. Peace, education, changing the world. Then you raise dollars in service of that goal, often in high-profile ways. Then you deliver minimal programming that has maximum PR value. And step 4, profit. Now, if you're at expert level, then you can also use those connections to climb the social ladder even higher. How can I possibly compare the Pope's pontifical foundation to a small-time scam? Because I'm following the evidence. Investigative reporting by the Catholic News Agency's sister agency, ACI Prensa, highlighted alarming red flags in their financials. The communications director of the Pontifical Foundation ignored the investigators' emails, then hung up on their call and blocked the journalist's number. That's the communications director, the person whose job is to communicate with the press. And this was back in 2020. So there is and has been zero accountability, even when the complaints are coming from Catholics themselves. Again, this is ringing a bell for me. This rings a bell. But it's also a closed loop with everyone staying in their places. The rich get richer while looking charitable. Donors get to feel good about themselves without engaging in any structural change whatsoever and without giving up any power, as if they could just clean their conscience with a check. And the poor, well, they're always with us, right? So what are you going to do? See you at the next black tie fundraiser. All these tourism plans could have been created by actual business people with actual investor capital. But instead, refugee kids were manipulated and discarded. How do you think that might impact them? How does it land when your life, your trauma history, and your image were used as part of the origin story of someone else's brand? And then you're just quietly written out of the script. I want to zoom in on the timeline of the shift. In March of 2012, the Kwepunha Retreat website goes live, publicly announcing to the whole world their new tourism business. In April, the kids are finally told about the change, meaning everyone else in the whole world knew about this drastic change to their home lives before they even did. In May, the Strongheart program in Liberia ends with a ceremony. Pictures show the room decorated with streamers and balloons. The kids are smiling, holding up certificates in front of a chalkboard that says, "Congratulations." The kids sang the founders a very touching song. And on social media, one of the kids says, quote, "It's so hard for me to believe Strongheart has closed." And then the response that he gets, here it is.
"We aren't closed. We're just moving locations."
This level of gaslighting is appalling. The complete disrespect and total disregard for these kids' feelings and lives. Because if you close the house he is living in and the program he is part of, and you tell him and his siblings that they can't come with you to where you're moving, then yes, effectively, you have closed. That permanent home base for orphan siblings, for them, it lasted less than 2 years. And the exact situation Corey originally claimed to be rescuing them from, being left destitute to fend for themselves without support, well, that's exactly what ended up happening. Strongheart frames it like this.
After 2 years in Liberia, our program had grown to include young people from across the world, and the decision was made to relocate to a more central location that offered a wider array of resources for our work.
The decision was made. Notice the passive voice. We don't know who made it. It just was made. The phrasing implies there was growth, continuity, and inclusion, as if the original fellows were simply being transferred to a better resource location. But what's the reality?
I'm not sponsored by Strongheart organization, because Strongheart organization who promised to help kids who pass through trauma and stuff didn't fulfill that purpose as they said that they were going to do for my entire family. And I was kicked out of the program.
While she doesn't give exact details, this move is likely the split. And during that period, social media posts from the fellows show shock, disappointment, and a sense of betrayal. And why wouldn't they? Their images and stories were central to fundraising and media promotion. At least one fellow, and likely more based on pictures, performed construction and maintenance work on the property that was later converted into a commercial surf hostel. Strongheart's language deliberately obscures whether kids stayed behind, were separated from siblings, were sent back to unstable conditions, or were expected to work on site at the rebranded property. The Surf Retreat website later claims at least 2 of the fellows as staff. And as for the new cohort, I can only find evidence of one African in that group. Then comes this line.
After much searching, we settled on the lovely, welcoming community of Austin, Texas in the United States as home base for our fellows.
An interesting coincidence, since a media profile had already described Corey as a 7th-generation Austinite. They called Corey Mom. They thought these people were their family. Whether kids stay on site to work or whether they were kicked out, both outcomes are psychologically damaging. If they stayed, they were trapped inside a rebranded project. They'd be exploited while feeling both indebted and betrayed. Their permanent home of healing now had people coming in and out without any control. If they moved, they'd experience a second abandonment. Both paths reinforce the same message. You only exist to me while you're useful. You're only valuable when you're serving my mission. All these elements taken together match multiple risk factors identified in a global analysis of institution-based exploitation of children for fundraising purposes. This does not require criminal intent. It simply requires a system where children's stories generate donations, the children's presence attracts volunteers and press, the children's labor sustains and funds the project, and the children are left unsupported when the adults move on. It started with promises to bring change and development to Robertsport, to the entire community. But what's the end result? The same old colonial hierarchy reappears, dressed in humanitarian rhetoric. White founders hold the capital. The narrative, the media coverage, and Black youth provide the marketing hook, the photos, and the labor that makes it go round. And ultimately, they're the ones that bear the consequences. Next time on The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up. I get an email from Corey's lawyer about that little cease and desist I mentioned, which inadvertently gives me a tip. And where do refugees come from anyway? Find out next time on The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up. The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up is written, produced, and narrated by me, micajringo. You can find all my references and sources in the show notes. This podcast does not suggest that any of Corey Stern's associates or any of the children were willing, knowing accessories to criminal acts.